Happy Wednesday, everyone. This is Emmanuel for History and Coffee with our On This Day series for March 13th. Today we're talking about the 162nd anniversary of Congress passing the Act Prohibiting the Return of Slaves. So this is part of a federal shift in policy towards emancipation that is interesting to think about in terms of moving from the 1850 Fugitive Slave Act towards the Emancipation Proclamation on January 1st, 1863. So what we have is, in 1850, with the Fugitive Slave Act, we really have the federal government committing itself to the protection of slavery and to really siding with enslavers in that relationship, to the Emancipation Proclamation, January 1st, 1863, where the federal government is assertively saying that it is committed to ending slavery, at least in Confederate-held areas. So when we think about that timeline, we have the Fugitive Slave Act of 1850, then we have the first Confiscation Act in August 1861, followed by today's anniversary, the Act Prohibiting the Return of Slaves in March 1862, then the second Confiscation Act in July 1862, followed by the preliminary Emancipation Proclamation in September of 1862, and then finally in January 1863, the full Emancipation Proclamation. So between the first Confiscation Act and the Emancipation Proclamation, self-liberating formerly enslaved people increasingly claim their freedom by seizing the opportunities presented by joining Union forces. And the Act Prohibiting the Return of Slaves escalated these developments by lessening the ability of renegade Union generals to put their own individual views on slavery in the way of federal anti-slavery policy. However, it's important to emphasize that there's no linear progression on this timeline from the Fugitive Slave Act to the Emancipation Proclamation. History does not work that way, right? Even when Lincoln issued his preliminary Emancipation Proclamation in September 1862, 4 months before his official Emancipation Proclamation, there were these everyday negotiations between federal power, Union officers, and emboldened self-liberators that constituted the construction of complex relationships between lived freedom and federal policy. It's also important to recognize that President Lincoln really never stopped worrying about how border states would react to emancipation policies. Even with the full Emancipation Proclamation in January 1863, emancipation policy only applied to Confederate areas. Lincoln recognized the polarization of emancipation in border regions, and so he intentionally weakened federal emancipation policy in areas of uncertain or shifting political loyalties. As historian Eric Foner emphasizes in his book, The Fiery Trial, Abraham Lincoln and American Slavery, the lack of border state applicability substantially weakened the realized freedom forged by the Emancipation Proclamation. However, this does not take away from the fundamental reality that this Emancipation Proclamation itself addressed and freed enslaved and formerly enslaved people directly, a major shift in federal policy. By thinking about today's Act Prohibiting the Return of Slaves anniversary, we stress how individual people experienced the gradual development of federal policy really in shifting and contingent ways over the course of time. Thank you so much for joining us today. I hope that you will join us again tomorrow for the continuation of our On This Day series for History and Coffee. Have a great day.